spent some time considering some of the reasons why bringing more open-ended, rich problems into our courses is important. And so now let's say that you do want to bring in some of these types of problems into maybe class discussions or homework. And I think the primary challenge that instructors often face is this kind of wealth of student ideas that can seem a little bit overwhelming. How do you manage all of these ideas, right? And so I know that when I first teach an open-ended problem, I'm always a little bit thrown off by some of the student ideas I didn't expect. But next we're going to hear from David Webb, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about how it's often the case that over time we can get a little bit more sense of what to expect. And he'll give us some principles for how to bring these kinds of things into our classrooms.
Of course. So I do think that when you plan instruction, you also have to have your goals in mind. You do want a sense of, when you pose questions, what are your hoped for responses from students, but then be open to a range of responses from students. And then I would say, as long as you're offering some open questions to students, be ready to, quote, harvest some ideas that you think you want to have interrelated, that you want to have considered among all students. You're not going to have time to have all students share their ideas, but have at least a couple ideas brought out, several ideas, and look at the pros and cons of those different approaches and what they take into account and what they don't. I'd say the first step really is opening up the windows into student learning through the questions that you ask. And do be prepared to seek the kinds of answers that you're looking for. Don't just ask questions willy-nilly, but make sure that you have a range of ideas that you might consider. And over time, you keep doing this, you do see a pattern in student responses, and you do see some common conceptions that are out there that help you adapt your instruction going forward. Yeah, you're not working with an infinite set of student ideas. Over time, the range of student responses starts to show up. You have really common conceptions. You could call them misconceptions or wrong ideas, I suppose, but they're ideas in process. And you could probably narrow them down to less than a half dozen different ideas. And if you can plan for those and expect those, your instruction can be more dynamic. Even though you have a pretty good idea of what students are going to do, the perception of students is that you are actually organizing instruction directly around them. But you have some prior information and experience to bring to bear to make those decisions. The rapport between the teacher and students is also important. I think there needs to be some level of trust between the teacher, the instructor, and students, that if I share ideas that aren't absolutely 100% correct, that I'm not going to get shot down, that I'm not going to get embarrassed. So the classroom has to be a safe place to offer up ideas. I think once there is this rapport developed, once they see this is a place to test out ideas, then I think the more open-ended questions, the questions that are going beyond recall, are going to thrive in that class. I mean, one thing we're all working against, though, is also a history of experiences. Students are coming with a history of experiences in classes where that's not the norm. But the more we can turn to that as a type of instruction that we do in science and STEM classes, then I think students will be more accepting and be more ready to engage from the beginning of the class rather than 3 weeks into the semester.
Okay, so let's say that we have a classroom where students feel comfortable sharing their ideas. There's still this really hard question: when do you let students explore? When do you lead them more? And it's still often really hard to hold back from giving the answer when students are thinking incorrectly. So now we'll hear from Steve Pollock a little bit about how this struggle plays out for him.
I always struggle with wanting to give students the answer to a question that I posed them. It's very natural. There's an answer I'm looking for, and when they're not producing it, I'm getting frustrated, worried, There's timing issues. There's lots of circumstances. It might be in a tutorial setting where we've dedicated 50 minutes for 5 pages worth of material, and I see students struggling with the first question on the first page, and I'm looking at my watch and thinking, if they don't get this, how are they going to get through the rest of this activity? And so it's awfully tempting to just help them along and give them the answer. I was once told by a postdoc that when she worked with students in the help room and they couldn't get a problem, she would reassure them at the beginning. She'd say, I'm not going to tell you the answer, but I guarantee you that by the time we're done here, you're going to know the answer. And that was just a little psychological trick to help calm everybody, both the teacher and the student. And I've used that trick many times since. But there have been times when even that didn't work and the student just kept saying, just tell me if I'm right or wrong. You don't have to tell me the answer, just tell me if what I said was right. And occasionally, sure, I'll tell them because I just need to calm everybody, including myself.
Well, I do think this is one of the most challenging aspects of teaching. You have a plan in mind, you have an instructional sequence in mind, but you also are trying to get students more engaged. You're trying to get their ideas brought out in the class. And I do think there's no right answer to this. I think you really have to develop this skill over time. As long as you're willing to open up your classroom instruction and assessment practices to students' ideas, you'll find the balance really based on how students engage in the ideas, the aha moments that increase in class, the willingness of students to take risks and to offer ideas that are in process.
So to conclude, we've seen today how open-ended, rich problems are really important to bring into our instruction, as well as some practical ways of doing so. And one of the big pieces that we saw for students is that it's really important that they can actually see different approaches to solving problems and to practice some persistence skills. And as instructors, these types of problems can really open up student thinking for us so that we can adapt our instruction accordingly. But this is really supported by our ability to draw out student ideas, which is a skill, and to create comfortable classroom spaces where students feel comfortable sharing their ideas.